Hi guys, thank you for stopping by at the Beginner's Mind with that victory. In this episode, we talk to Dan White. Dan White's recent book, Smart Branding Book, has been shortlisted as UK Best Business Book of the Year 2024. Dan and I chat about changes in recent marketing thinking, whether segmentation, targeting, positioning, those concepts are still valid, whether brand love exists, what are the challenges CMOs face in the recent environment, and how research can help meet those challenges. I hope you like our conversation. For such discussions, please do follow our channel. Okay, Dan, thank you for giving time and apologies for all these technological issues. I think we'll get right straight into the interview and chat.
Okay, great.
Uh, Tell me what are you up to these days? I mean, how's your thinking evolving on brand strategy, and how are you looking at I saw some of the notes from you that
Mm.
the old frameworks, you're questioning the old framework like segmentation, target positioning. How are you thinking about that, and how did it come across?
Well, I guess, I mean, I think like a lot of us, our thinking continually evolves as we read more and we have more experience and we have more discussions. But I think that that area is definitely an area where I think some of the traditional thinking that still lingers in the industry, it can be quite misleading, particularly around the idea of positioning and choosing a positioning that tries to appeal to a distinct subset of category buyers and distance yourself from others, simply because the stats, the mathematics, the data, the evidence suggests that's not how it works. So that post you mentioned just before that got so much interest is because a lot of people still think that brands compete by being different and more importantly, by appealing to a different set of people and only being bought and having high loyalty amongst a certain group is the way to be successful. And that's not the case, according to
Why do you say that? I mean, if I see the living example, I mean, this theory has worked. Look, I don't claim to be an expert in that. I am just saying that this theory has worked for years. The theory is there, and working with some of the marketers closely, I think I find a lot of execution issues, whether they're executing the strategy properly or not. So again, I'm still more on the traditional thinking, and I think you segment the consumer, you target, and you position it. Kind of makes sense. I mean, if I look at all the cars, if I look at burgers or whatever, and if I look the examples, I think you can place the examples in different segment and kind of makes sense to me.
But I suppose I think that the loyalty point's the key one.
Okay.
If that is the way that brands succeed and compete with others, you would expect different brands to have very different profiles of users. And you'd expect those people to be loyal to the people who buy it, to be loyal to that brand because it's different, and to not buy other brands very much at all. But that's not the case. The data is really clear that all brands compete with all others, and loyalty is dependent just on the size of the brand, not its positioning. It's just about you do not get significantly differences in loyalty that go beyond the size of your penetration of your brand. It doesn't sort of stack up. You know what I mean? It just and in all categories, heavy category buyers, they buy lots of different brands, including the small ones and the big ones. If you look at as a scientific theory, you have to test it against the evidence, and it just doesn't hold up against the data. There is a role for segmentation and profiling, STP, and that is to reach as many category users as you can through different media channels, which are definitely used by very different types of people, particularly age. We know this, and interest and all these things. So you do have to segment your audience, but not so that you pick one or two to focus on and get loyalty amongst. You segment it to try and find the best way of getting to all of them in different ways through different media, etc. Does that make sense? That's
no, So I think you're not against the idea of segmenting itself or personifying the
Yeah,
consumers.
but the reason for doing it is quite different. So the segmenting is useful to have a more effective media plan, let's call it, or marketing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you can most cost effectively reach different groups. Byron Sharp, as you know, I'm a big believer in his work, calls that sophisticated mass marketing. So the distinction is you're still trying to get to as many different category users as possible. You're not trying to go, we want to get to this type and we're not interested in those, and we're going to try and grow by trying to get our share of wallet amongst this group to be high, because that cannot work, because it just, the maths, that there is no, the data is supports no data.
Okay, I think let me just get into a different thing. What's your favorite brand like? I mean, when you think of brands, like what ranks, which you're really impressed by?
Well, I always find this hard, but I do have a set of brands that I tend to refer to a lot to illustrate things, because I think they do a lot.
Yeah, right. Illustration is amazing.
The three that I use too often probably are Snickers.
Okay.
Snickers chocolate, Red Bull, and Hendrix.
Okay. Okay. And why is that? Like, let's pick Snickers. And what do you like about Snickers? And
I think, well, a lot of these are for similar reasons actually, but I think they have incredible consistency in their advertising execution, their use of taglines, their use of distinctive brand assets. It's repeated, it's used across many channels, it's and it inspires lots of creativity. So they have an idea about the brand, whether you call it positioning or not is another, we can get onto that. But it clearly inspires lots of accessible, relevant, interesting, memorable communications, in particular for Snickers, I think.
Okay. And is the same reason for Hendrix and Red Bull?
Pretty much, yes. But I mean, Red Bull's an interesting case for the way they grew physical availability over the years, and how they did that, and how they got into the how they initially got traction, and then how they grew their physical distribution through supermarkets, and then how they conquered America by having their own distribution network and all sorts of, the business model was very clever over the years. But
I think so I think this brings to me another question which I struggle with sometimes. And if I look at Red Bull, I think that they're kind of a very different brand, right? In their category. So I think I've been reading about differentiation and distinctiveness, right? And I grew up following a lot about differentiation. The brand needs to differentiate in order to grow. But I think there is a lot of emphasis on distinctiveness in buying Cherry and how brands grow. And where are you on that?
Yeah, I mean, I find it quite difficult to head around, because in a way that the two are definitely connected to each other. If you're very distinct in terms of having distinctive brand assets, having a very distinct logo, color, look, feel, all these things, that helps to, let's call it, distance the brand in people's mind. It makes it so there is a distancing there. It is different, but I think it depends how you define these terms. But difference as in it appeals to different people because of its differences. For example, could be its flavor or whatever, or other things. Or often, so Byron Sharp would say difference means trying to be functionally completely delivering against different needs to different people. That's the bit that doesn't make sense. But being a sense of difference, and this is where I have good healthy debates with Kantar, people at Kantar. You say, so like, for example, I can't remember what it was, but something like, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they have finger licking good, which most people agree that's a distinctive brand asset. It's just a phrase, it's a bit of fun. It makes the brand more memorable and stand out by being distinctive. But they also talk about having a unique blend of 11 secret herbs and spices. Now I think of that as yet another distinctive brand asset. It's just a thing about the people, and they talk about, and they put posters up in the restaurants, don't they? It's another thing that helps it become more distinct in the brain and more easier to remember, and that sort of position.
I get it. I get it where you're coming from. The thing which I learned about difference is about preposition. That is, you stand for something. You stand for something different, and you stand for, let's say, in laundry category. Why you wash really clean, for example, to be very simple, a functional attribute. You wash really clean. Now, when you wash really clean, the consumer perception of you on that is so different that on the measures of differentiation, which is we used to do brand image profiles, you're kind of an extreme, and that's what.
Okay. This is quite an important distinction, right? Which is between brand versus product, because you think about, obviously I know Skip and Persil and Omo, that brand.
Yeah.
And for a long time they did initially, Persil washes whiter, which is the old phrase. But of course, Persil also launched Persil Color variant and various other variants. And the color one is nothing to do with washing whiter. That product is for people who wear colorful clothing and want to keep the colors bright. And that's why, actually, after a long time, admittedly, Persil went to a completely different campaign, which was about dirty is good. Now, dirty is good is quite clever because it's standing for something, but actually, is it more actually just a really cool idea and phrase that helps the brand be more memorable and distinctive in the brain? But it still has lots of different products that appeal to different needs and to an extent, a small extent, to slightly different people. So brands might not compete at that level, but products can help you appeal to different category needs. And there will be some differences in the profile of people for those who buy those products more or less. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. But are you kind of a believer of, let's say, brand love? Brand love exists or it doesn't exist?
No, not really. I certainly not phrased as love, because you look at the neuroscience data and you can show physiological responses to things that people really love, as in not brands, but and then you show them their physiological responses to brands, and they're tiny. You can tease it out, and some are a bit, there is a stronger emotional response to some brands than others. So I do believe that there is an emotional connection that varies a little bit. I personally wouldn't call it love. I think it's confusing because it implies that they actually love it. Now, so if you love something, you tend to be exclusive to it, right?
Yeah.
That's not the case with brands. The vast majority of buyers of a brand, and where all your volume comes from and all your growth can come from, will not be from the tiny minority who only buy you. They exist. But there's a tiny number, and they are irrelevant to your brand's growth and success. So yes, it exists, but it is so rare, and it's misleading to think you're going to get lots of people into that category of love in order to your brand to be successful. Now, that concept is irrelevant.
But is it the category thing? I mean, if you look at FMCG, loving a brand is difficult. But if I bring it to technology, I mean, I love Apple. I used to love Apple, not anymore, because those jokers are not, really innovating. It's iPhone 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's what they're coming out with.
Yeah.
I love Tesla a lot. So is it category specific? Because one is
then you said you love Apple, right? But you now don't love them. You're moving on. People, it's not even when it's the extreme case, as in quite a lot of people seem to say that they really, really like or love Apple. But when circumstances change, or they're not innovating enough, or they lose their job and they need to find a much cheaper phone, they're quite happy to switch around. And that's why the switching and moving from one brand to another is much more than we realize it is. Like cars, I've got some data on cars I use in my training, car brands in the US. And every brand loses between, if they buy a car, if someone buys a brand of car, 60 to 70% of them will not buy that car next time they buy a car. That's the stat. Even with
Okay.
cars, where you think hard, people talk about loving the brand of car that they buy, even the big brand, so there are more important things,
In
and
consumers'
that
life.
loyalty is fleeting. If there is loyalty, but it's weak and it's fleeting. And
Okay.
therefore, thinking that that's the thing to focus on to be a successful brand and to keep lots of people buying you and getting more people is flawed. And that's the bit I really want to challenge. That's the bit I think people don't. They're not. The industry. I would say 8 out of 10 don't accept that or don't know that kind of data. So I'm quite passionate about it, actually.
No, I think, look, I'm clearer now, especially when after that you gave the example of the cars. I mean, 60, 70% these people are buying, they're not buying the same cars, I think. But again, if we cut it down by the brands, maybe how would it change? That's a different thing. But I broadly get the point. But the acceptability of this theory in academics, for example, I told you, like, I'm teaching in a university here, and I couldn't find Buy and Shop marketing book in the library.
No, you won't. You very rarely do. Yeah.
And
I find that astounding. I mean, and also you get a lot of negativity towards Buy and Shop. You do. I mean, a lot. I try and just try and be like a scientist should be and be objective, and try and think, well, does this fit everything I've read and seen? And so when I did that post that basically suggested that Kotler and Keller were wrong about STP, they weren't wrong about the whole of STP, but in terms of how brands actually compete with each other, I would love it. I would absolutely love it if someone said, yeah, but you're forgetting that this data exists, that challenges the Buy and Shop view and supports the fact that brands do need to grow loyalty amongst a segment of people in order to be successful. But because I try to be so open-minded. I don't have an axe to grind, and I've changed my views as I've assimilated more stuff, because I'm like a magpie that likes to bring everything in.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and test and go, okay, is there something here that tests, in which case check, my worldview of marketing and how it works. And that's why I do all these kind of diagrams to see how does everything fit in, and if it doesn't all fit in, then something's got to be wrong, right?
So the worldview of marketing, I know it's a big question. Worldview of marketing. When you think of the worldview of marketing, what comes to your mind? Like,
what I mean by that, well, I mean things like the concept of how important physical availability is, distribution. I think a lot of people and penetration being a key driver, but then you've also got advertising that needs to fit into that model. And we talk about advertising need to grab and hold attention and be emotional bonding. We talk about the emotions created by advertising. You go, oh, hang on, I've said over here that brand love doesn't really exist and it's not a strong thing. Why do I believe that advertising that creates strong emotion is effective? But it does. Now that works because you're trying to gain attention through the emotion. So you don't love, you can just have an emotional reaction to an ad that helps to make the brand more memorable by linking the brand with a distinctive brand asset. If you work it all out, the things that appear to be contradictory aren't necessarily, if you've got this. Hence I do lots of things to see how it all fits together. And when a new thing comes in, I test it against all the other things that I've built up from evidence, I hope. Or certainly whatever evidence I have come across. Now that's not the same thing.
Sure. No, I get
that's
it.
the big problem. There could be just a whole tranche of data and evidence that I don't know of that would actually mean that this bit's completely wrong. But I'll keep trying.
No, I get it. It's an evolution. We are a process, and I think at one point of time we can say that this is great, but at another point of time when new evidence comes and we got to change, and that's.
And I think that's fine to say. That's why I think it's fine to say that Kotler and Keller were wrong about the very specific thing about at the brand level that segmenting and targeting positioning is not the secret. And hence, this is a really good debate to have, because it's like, well, when is segmentation, targeting, and positioning relevant? Well, I'll go, well, segmentation targeting is useful. Whether you call it positioning or not, no, you'd call it maximizing messages and creative to appeal to different demographics. Okay, that's a nuance, but that's an important nuance, because if you understand it as well as that, I understand it really, but if you have a clear model, then you can help advise and execute things better.
Yeah. So, any particular branding framework, like,
Mm.
I grew up on measuring brand equity, right? Your brand equity for a particular brand is like X, and it's X plus Y, X plus Z. And all my life in 10 years, I've not seen brand equity going up consistently. Either it's remains stable or it goes down. And I think that maybe with the matured brands also it's very difficult. But you have any idea, any construct on that? You think brand equity measurement is out of realm, or?
Well, again, this is very much in the Ehrenberg Bass way of thinking, which is I like the idea of brand equity being the totality of the brand coming to mind for different usage contexts.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's not that different from the way we used to talk about it in terms of brand image, whether you call it image, what you call it or not, it's a set of associations. We used to have an image grid. We both worked at Millward Brown.
Yeah.
And that image grid actually was a set of, in some cases, was a set of, a bit like category entry points.
Yeah,
like which brands do you think are, and then ... and then the list of things like, good for greasy hair, make me look beautiful, give me confidence. I mean, they're a mix. Those are.
It's what makes the brand. Yeah.
And we also know, by the way, from that, I'm sure we both remember that big brands are high on all of those attributes in absolute sense.
Yeah. The big brand effect, we used to call it.
Nuanced stuff to tease out small differences, which again goes to that point that probably the big brands are competing with the small brands on the niche usage, okay, which they are. If they're sensible, because they grew probably by releasing different products that help them be seen to be relevant for all, not all, but lots and lots of different needs and moments and occasions and things. One of my favorite pictures is Coke from years ago, like a montage of Coke ads. It's on my website.
Okay. No, I saw your website. Very impressive.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's my legacy, so I try to keep adding to it. But it's all these Coke ads, and it's basically usage occasion, about 30, not 30, how many's on it, but 16 different usage occasions. But they did many more. Coke's great for entertaining your boss. Coke's great for when you want to go fishing. Coke's great if you want to, with your Thanksgiving meal. Coke's great for, they're they're actually not even, they're very specific. That's the way they decided to execute. But they basically had a category entry point strategy back in the 1920s, and it worked, Physical availability, get it sold absolutely everywhere. You get people to think of using Coke. Look, guess what I'm drinking now in the middle of the afternoon? It's Coke. What am I don't know. It's quite warm. Great, that's a big one. I had it for breakfast instead of coffee because I don't know. I went to America and everyone was drinking Coke in the morning. I thought that's a good idea. I don't like coffee.
Yeah. So I get it. But we've been kind of drawing some kind of relationship between brand equity and penetration, and we're saying that they are feeding into each other. Is that?
Yeah. Because a big driver of brand equity, however you define it, is probably recent experience of, and that reinforces it. And if it's high penetration, if you've used it recently, that's a really powerful reinforcement of your connection with the brand and the memorability of the brand and the fact that it still tastes fine, and so also distribution, because the distribution itself, if you see it in more places, it reminds you of it and reinforces the asset and the look of it and the feel of it. That just keeps it stronger in your head than Pepsi in most countries.
So I come to advertisement now. I think we were all lovers once, advertisement lovers, and I don't know, I don't love advertising anymore. I don't see any inspirational advertising around. Is that the case with you? Or?
Yeah, it's the same in my experience. And there are whole movements happening. I just saw a LinkedIn group being established by Brian Jacobs, who used to be at Millward Brown as well, actually. Wanting to save the quality of thinking and creativity in both the content side and the media side of advertising, believing that the art of truly great advertising is dying quite dramatically. And I think I agree with that. I think it has, because of the focus on performance, which is biased towards shorter term results, can be misleading for longer term success, and that's probably the main reason why. But a lot of companies are trying to work to address this problem. I'm doing
Do
some
you
work.
have a view on that, like how the short term, long term, balance? How can it be achieved? Do you have a view on that? I've
Yeah.
been seeing some videos on 40% short term, 60% long term. I don't believe in those numbers personally,
No,
but
there are, and this is where Binet and Field have done a lot of work, which was the original 60-40 on average. Got to remember, on average, recommendation towards brand building and activation. And then they've refined that, which, because it varies by brand size. Smaller brands need a bit more, a bit more on the activation side, and bigger brands need do best with more on the build side. But I think what's confusing is that it depends what you mean by 60-40. The way I think of it, and I think this is the way that it makes most sense, is it's 60% have it brand building effect and 40% activation effect. Now the problem is every ad has a bit of both. Some probably have a better short-term effect and maybe not such a good longer-term effect, and some the other way around. So it's not about saying, well, this social media is an activation channel. No, it's not. It depends how you use it. Depends on your creativity, and you will always have some brand building effect. Even with short exposures, it's well possible. So it's not like you can't pigeonhole channels. No way. That's wrong. But you probably should be thinking about both effects and how much you're investing in the kind of channels and executions that are more one than the other, and get that balance right. Do you see what I mean? So it's a really nuanced debate. I mean, the phrase double duty advertising, you can get truly great ads that are very memorable and will make the brand stay in long-term memory, but also remind people very much that they want to buy it now, and people in the decision window will be triggered by that brand building ad to activate. So you shouldn't really label the ads, but you can think of the effects. Does that make sense? That's my
it does. Tell me, when you talk about effective advertising, what it is? What is it? I mean,
what is what?
Effective advertising.
Well, I'd say, effective. I'd say, well, I think these days I think quite differently from how I used to think, which is I would define effective as is good at gaining your attention.
Okay.
And distinct visual and audio distinctiveness is helpful there, and generating triggering emotions is very helpful there, and generating emotions is also important because it helps it be more memorable. So you've got like attention and memorability that become the most important things. So it grabs attention and is memorable in association with your brand is probably, for me, the two phrases I would use to say that's effective. Now behind that means probably things like triggering emotions through storytelling, including distinctive assets that are linked to the brand, or now or in the future. Those all become part of effectively grabbing attention and being memorable.
Those are the mechanics. Those are the ingredients, I would say. Those are the mechanics or ingredients.
That's right. They're the ingredients of what you're trying to do, which is those two main things. There's loads of ways to think about. I used to, yes. But
how about buying something based on advertisement, purchase behavior shift, and all that stuff? Like, we'd say that if advertising can't sell, then it's not effective. Where does that fit into your?
I mean, advertising. Yeah, sorry, you could. Yeah, maybe you should rewind and say effective advertising. Yeah, is advertising that sells either in the short term or the long term. In brackets. Either in the short term and the long term, or even more sophisticatedly, that its total impact on purchasing is great. So effective advertising is advertising whose total effect on purchasing, bracket, factoring in both short and very long-term effect, is high. So that's effective. And then and to do that, you need to be good at grabbing attention and being memorable, and some of the ingredients of that are the ones we talked about earlier. There's a layering, but I think the idea it's all about selling, but it's like when the sales effect happens. When it happens.
That's a very important part.
Yeah, and how long it lasts. So I think a lot about the effect, the short-term effect, and the long-term, and the decay rates effectively. Memorability decay rates are also important.
Yeah. Is it really good? Does it work, the advertising measurement? I mean, you measure it, it's successful. In market effect is pretty shit, So I don't know whether, I know it's a multi-million industry, right? 400, 500, 600 $1 million is spent on measuring ads, but is it worth it? There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to get your view.
I think I'm still a big fan of pre-testing myself, because I believe even if you can't give a very accurate fix, you can learn so much about the response to your advertising, so you can make it better at both short and or long, depending on what you're trying to do. So I would definitely do that. That's not measurement exactly, is it? It's optimization, And I think the side of measurement that does work are things. It's not very granular, but I think market mix modeling, sales modeling, is still the best way to go. And some of the newer, the more sophisticated versions of that are very effective. I'm a big fan of cross-media type modeling.
Oh, okay. You are a big fan.
Well, I am, but again, you have to use surrogates for long-term effects. You have to use surrogates. You do not measure it directly. You're measuring shifts in things effectively because of exposure that other data has proven is related to long-term effects. I'm a believer in that. It's just the sales model is better because it's a more direct measure of the sales. But you can fit them all together, and I think they still have a role, I think.
Okay, just 2 more questions and then I'll let you go because we're running out of time. And I think CMO's challenge. What's the CMO's challenge, Dan, these days, in your view? What's the key challenge?
It's related to what we've been saying, I think, which is that the big challenge is to be able to either prove or convincingly argue for the total long-term profit benefit of marketing activity and advertising in particular. That hasn't really gone away. That hasn't changed. In fact, it's hard now because if you just look at the short-term effects and you don't factor in the long-term effects, it might not add up. It might not look. It'll look like a very weak return, possibly no return in some cases. You have to, that rule of thumb that you take your short-term effect and you times it by 2 or 3 to understand your total effect of advertising. You need to know that, and you need to be able to convince your managers, your CEO, your CFO. That's not changed at all.
The last question: where is research missing? Where does it need to pull up its socks? The marketing research, as we say, or
I think it's got to get a little bit more commercial still. As in, it's no point in saying, it'll have short-term effect. There'll also be a longer-term effect because people really love the advertising. It's probably going to be quite memorable. And then, well, okay, how much? I don't know. You can't quantify such things. No, you have to. You have to have model. You have to have a way to try and do it and keep refining that. So that's where my focus is at the moment. Actually, working with Dentsu actually to try and crack this. So watch this space. Hopefully for something big. We'll see.
That would be amazing. I mean, I would look forward to that because that's a critical part. So then, on that note, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and good luck with all your great endeavors.
Thanks very much. Good to talk to you.